nothing but truth on AFR Talk.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. And he's been in the bullpen, and it's because Crane went overtime. And I want to get to him right now. He is the national security analyst for the Clarion Project, clarionproject.org. He is an outstanding debater, as he debated another outstanding debater, Seton Motley, on Friday. We are going to have more debates featuring Ryan and Seton, for that matter, in the future. Not necessarily against each other, but against different folks, and maybe each other. We'll keep going. Ryan Mauro, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It is really interesting when you try to schedule people who don't agree with you on issues, and they're not conservatives. Really interesting. Just a general note out there of trying to bring people on from opposing views. I see conservatives always go on liberal shows. If they're asked, they'll go. I'm really seeing it's just interesting. I mean, really, well, there are expressions I remember in my youth.
You're calling liberals scaredy cats, aren't you?
Yes, fraidy cats. That's exactly what they are, and it is troubling. But I understand because, hey, it's radio. This is why liberal talk radio doesn't really work, because it's only so much you can go with knee-jerk, emotional, ad hominem attacks. And then you got to focus on selling your policy and how it works. And to do that, you got to cite history. Interestingly enough, though, when it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood, Republicans, Democrats, people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who supported the surge, if I'm not mistaken, don't get it when it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood. Speaking today. Roll it.
We have one main message. Democracy is the only viable path to lasting stability, national reconciliation, and sustainable economic growth, and the return of investment and tourism in Egypt. That means more than elections. It means democratic governance, an inclusive political process in which all Egyptians are free and able to participate so long as they do so nonviolently.
In a democracy, you have to sit down and talk with each other, even though you may not like the person on the other side of the table. It is impossible to talk with somebody who's in jail. That is not a sustainable model that will allow transition to occur.
So, Ryan Mauro, you're at that press conference that Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham, as they are speaking to the release of jailed Muslim Brotherhood members, as they are attempting to move ahead on a policy that would restore, I guess, what they would call democracy in Egypt. Ryan, what would you ask? What would you say?
Probably nothing, because I probably would have walked out of the press conference before it could finish, because I just wouldn't be able to handle it. But it's basically, the problem here is that you have Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator John McCain, who used to be really tough on the Muslim Brotherhood, and now, after they've met with the Muslim Brotherhood, they were charmed, because the Muslim Brotherhood is actually a nice group of people in general on a one-on-one basis. And they believe that, oh, well, because they're democratically elected, that's all you need for a democracy. And I think that's really belittling to just how much of a miracle and how powerful a democracy is. It's more than just elections. It's about having a democratic culture and the different institutions of governance. And so when you had the Muslim Brotherhood come in and take power, and they were able to stack the parliament with all of their supporters, they were able to ram down a Sharia-filled constitution down the people's throats, that's really no longer a democracy. And so I think that Senator John Kerry, now Secretary of State, was correct when he said that the military intervention was a corrective measure. It wasn't a military coup saying we want power for ourselves. It was done at the request of millions and millions and millions of Egyptians.
Well, I'm getting reports that while over there, and they're over there making these statements, Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham are saying it was a coup. So it tells me that what is our policy? I mean, do we really know? I recognize the Secretary of State would speak for the administration, which would dictate the policy, and the purse strings would come from Congress. But my point is this. It seems that we have sent mixed signals, as you're discussing this and laying out, to the people who desire to be free.
Oh, yeah, we've alienated everybody in Egypt, and that's because the central pillar of our Middle Eastern policy was based on the idea that groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and especially the Muslim Brotherhood are moderate compared to al-Qaeda, that they can be dealt with because their disagreements with us are mainly political, and when two parties have an interest in settling that political dispute, then you can have a give and take. You can negotiate. And so they're different than al-Qaeda. That's the mindset of the Obama administration, but it doesn't work. And so when we reach out to the Muslim Brotherhood, they still hate us, as they always have. We weren't able to convince them to give up their beliefs that they've had since 1928. And then the people who oppose the Muslim Brotherhood look at us reaching out to the Muslim Brotherhood and say, well, the U.S. isn't helping us either, and so by trying to satisfy everyone, you satisfy nobody.
I just go back. You're going back to 1928. I just go back to 1979, 80 with the project and what they wrote about what they wanted to do and how to do it. But you're telling us that nearly a century of this, we're getting closer to the century mark when it comes to these folks, and 15 years off. And so it really tells me that there's a willful blindness here. What do you think is at the heart of it? I mean, I recognize you're saying that this is the way to a peaceful Middle East, and but do they ever consider the evidence against it?
I question that, and that's because politicians tend to live in a bubble. They have advisors around them who they obviously believe and have a lot of confidence in, otherwise they wouldn't pick them as their advisors. And there's so much information that a president needs to see that it gets filtered through these advisors and those around them, that it results in this self-imposed intellectual bubble. And I think that happens to presidents of both political parties. I think we definitely saw it under President Bush. I think you're seeing it again under President Obama. And so that school of thought really gets ingrained until the Muslim Brotherhood or some other character that you have this misconception about does something so crazy and so obviously against your point of view that it's forced to change. So if the Muslim Brotherhood declares formally a jihad, right, which right now they're kind of egging on there and they're getting closer to, then finally President Obama might have to change his mind.
Okay, so how many Christians and people that are true, I guess what we would call Democrat small d, how many people have to die? Or do we just have to see them die and then we'll take action?
It depends on who's killing them. Because generally, whenever they get killed, it's blamed on al-Qaeda, and they say, oh, well, the Muslim Brotherhood is nonviolent. When the Muslim Brotherhood stops the charade and they drop the mask, and they blatantly call for violence, and then they start acting upon that call for violence, at that point you can't argue that they're moderate anymore, and so they end up undermining their own support and really doing a favor for the United States because then they discredit their own propaganda.
Okay, just shifting gears to Yemen, pulling out U.S. personnel there. Is this more insight into the threat that has closed 22 but now 19 diplomatic posts in the Middle East today?
Well, there is evidence of activity going on in Yemen right now. I think it's clear that they have specific intelligence of some type of attack being on its way in Yemen, but when you read the language of the warnings and the way everyone's acting, it's obvious that the plot is much, much bigger than Yemen, that we're talking about a wave of simultaneous attacks, and Yemen is just the most obvious spot. But members, presumably of al-Qaeda, but terrorists did kill a Yemeni officer yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, and then they shot down a helicopter today. So they're clearly gearing up for a fight. Whether they'll succeed in blowing up the embassy or not, who knows, but this is basically the objective behind al-Qaeda in unleashing these attacks is they're trying to get stature for the new number 2 man that just got appointed.
Okay, and in essence, that stature is about respect and something he can claim as a victory.
Right, so if you appoint the leader of al-Qaeda's branch in Yemen as your number 2 man, you've got to do something to show that the West needs to be scared of that, and that's not a defeat, that's not a reflection just of the fact that we keep killing their leaders left and right, that is something that Zawahiri actually approves of and thinks is a good thing. And so they're trying to make their mark right now, and that's why one of the intercepts that we have is that Zawahiri was telling this new number 2 guy, he said, just do something. It wasn't even specific in nature. He just said, just do something.
Mm-hmm. Ryan Mauro, the man who has been looking at he tells the truth about our enemy's PR campaign that is here in the United States and calls him out, he needs to be in that press room asking the questions. I wish you were advising these guys, man. We'd be in a lot better place, but we do appreciate you advising us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Ryan Mauro, ClarionProject.org. Check it out. Crane Durham, we're out of time. I'll go after Crane on the Facebook. Check out that phone call. Fred Jackson, Fort Hood Mother Survivor. Facebook page, Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Live with honor in your life, compassion in your heart. Always keep the faith in Jesus Christ and know that God knows you, God loves you, He created you, and you're worth it. AFR Talk.